I have a genuine question. What era was peak FNAF? You may cite the beginning because that's how it all started. That's where Scott took that shot in the dark and created the original horror phenomenon. Or you may say FNAF 4, because in terms of not only lore, this game really was the first to reinvent the wheel and offer a new unique type of gameplay that challenged what we were used to. I mean, the safe pick would probably be FNAF 6, since the powerful conclusion and story relevance it had is something that's unmatched, even with the new games. They all failed to just match the powerful conclusion, which was Henry's speech. You could say it's security breach, but even if we do look at the positive sides of all the hard work Still Williams put into the rendition of their take on the franchise, there's still a lot to be desired and it's far from perfect. So what is the best era? What was the peak? Did FNAF even have a peak? Was this franchise even at such a point in popularity that— let me shut my dumb ass up. You read the title. Let's get into it. I've already made a video glazing FNAF 2, talking about how it's a perfect sequel and the best FNAF game, which is highly debatable. So it would be no use gushing over how much I appreciate the game. But that video is old and it sucks. So let's do it again. But first, let's recap.
What we do here is go back.
The Industrial Revolution. Sorry, curse of the video essay. Where we actually start is with Scotty McShoddy Cawthon. We all know the story. This man was currently in his flop era, making Christian games that didn't bring in any bread. His game library wasn't anything too notable, wasn't gonna land him any jobs at Activision or Blizzard, which actually is a positive thing considering both studios are crashing and burning. But nonetheless, the Scott Cawthon stock were crashing, and after receiving the criticism that his character's modeling was so poor, they looked like animatronics, he had a brilliant idea.
I've got an idea!
Hello everybody, my name is Markiplier.
Yeah, you've heard it. FNAF 1 slapped. It wasn't the most mechanically complex game, wasn't even the prettiest, but it managed to be different from everything that was offered at the time. You can make an argument that it got lucky because the indie horror scene wasn't so oversaturated at the time, but counterpoint, shut the fuck. It may have got lucky, yes, but if it wasn't so unique for what it was, it wouldn't have stayed lucky. During the hike of popularity, we started to see the embers of a great fandom being born. Comic dubs, fan games, music, all started because of the hype behind this new game. Oh, wow. This just in. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a direct competitor. FNAF 2, the most praised FNAF game. Every FNAF boomer has this game at the top of their ranking, and I'm pretty sure Still Will could make the greatest FNAF game of all time. Nay, greatest horror game of all time, and people will still say FNAF 2 clears. That's the power of this game. Its impression upon the player base is one that most other games in the franchise can't compare to.
I can't fucking compete! I just can't fucking compete! Can you get the fuck out of my face?
Why was this so praised? I mean, let's be honest with each other. FNAF games aren't really a marvel in game design.
I beg your pardon?
Even if its own league of genre, there are far more intuitive experiences that surpass the whole package of FNAF 2. And in its own league of games, it's not the best in the franchise. For as much as a high degree this game is held up to, objectively there are a catalog of entries that are far more superior. But despite the cold honest truth, the ice cold water to the face, how does this game have such a legendary status? What triggers the primal neurons in our brains to hold this game at such a high regard? It's just better.
Again, FNAF 1 and 2 are high up for me, and I might put FNAF 2 on S tier for now, because FNAF 2, to me guys, was like the high key of FNAF was FNAF 2.
Its popularity isn't just because of the game, it's the internet landscape that was molded around it. But before we can touch on that, let's actually start with the game. FNAF 2 started at a huge advantage. It was riding off the high of FNAF 1, a game in which was taking over the internet. The stocks were high and Scotty Dottie McToddy Cawthon was about to cash in. 4 months later, he dropped the trailer for the new game, and never has there been a time like this where people all across the internet came together to watch this trailer. Even people who had nothing to do with FNAF, like, what is the Real Rejects doing here? This was a gathering that has not been matched since. Well, numbers wise, yes, but the whole hype behind the franchise getting a new installment was at its peak. Nowadays, we kind of just expect a new installment, whether that be in game form or book form. It was that fresh excitement of it being the first sequel. People were genuinely curious on what Scott would do with the game, what would happen next. That level of anticipation was off the charts, and Scott delivered with just the trailer. The withered animatronics, the toy animatronics, no doors, the misleading mask mechanic, and the withered Foxy jump scare, pure hype of a trailer. Then the game came out and it was pretty good.
Put FNAF 2 on S tier.
Whether you like him and don't like him, is nothing you could do about him because he's number one. Whether you like him or don't like him, is nothing you can do about him because he's number one.
FNAF 2 is the Soulja Boy of the franchise. It was the first game to do anything. The first game to have more than 5 characters. Not only just the original cast in a withered state, but also a new revamped version of the original cast, as well as the marionette and Easter egg characters. I mean, just look at these designs. Scott was in his bag when he made these. It was the first to have different mechanics because there was no doors, the staple of the franchise at the time. It was a huge gamble to literally change how your entire game was played in the next entry, but hey, it actually worked. Actually, I find the gameplay on the higher nights to be quite repetitive. Instead of doors and lights, we got lights and a Party City mask. Yes, there is an argument to be made that in retrospect that these being the too many ways to defend yourself made for a repetitive and tedious gameplay loop, but y'all weren't saying that in 2015, so shut the fuck. In 2015, this was reinventing the wheel. What I personally enjoyed about the mask was how close the animatronics could get up to you. It felt like they were actually invading your personal space, like you had just been in a close call between life and death. Compared to FNAF 1, you never got that scope of how much danger you're in, like you do in FNAF 2. In FNAF 1, it's more like, ooh, he's in the door, close it. But there's one thing I will admit, it's kind of goofy the way they leave. It's just a flash of black and they're gone. It kind of ruins the immersion. It makes it seem like they're just teleporting. I don't think there was any other options because a full-on running animation probably wasn't in the budget and would have been worse for the immersion. But the biggest thing this game added was lore. Well, lore that mattered. I mean, think about it. Most major lore revelations started with this game. The cryptic pre-night cutscenes and the Atari-style death minigames, the pinnacle of FNAF storytelling. No books, no wall tiles, just good old-fashioned subliminal messaging that probably didn't mean as much as we thought it did. At least before Scott saw the theories and decided to crank that shit up to 100.
Man, this was such a satisfying end to the original FNAF series. I hope they don't ruin it.
FNAF 2 introduced the purple guy, which retroactively created the biggest icon of early FNAF fandom content, Vincent, and also Jeremy and Fritz. But for those of you who would like to not be reminded of the cesspool which was Rebornica and the creations from the inner machinations of her mind, I'll shine a light on the biggest reason I think FNAF 2 is so powerful: the impact it had on the internet landscape.
It's been so long since last I've seen my son lost to this monster, to the man behind the slaughter. Since you've been gone, I've been singing this stupid song so I could ponder the sanity of your mother.
Some of the most iconic pieces of FNAF media came from this area of FNAF. Mangled, which is my favorite Name Wants to Battle FNAF song, was a FNAF 2 song. The man who should not be named may survive the night, but could not survive the allegations. And let us not forget, It's Been So Long, which to a lot of people is considered the best FNAF song, or at the very least the most iconic, simply because of the phrase, the man behind the slaughter. Some of the fandom's greatest bangers were created because of the existence of FNAF 2, and I don't mean just songs. This SFM video, 5 Funky Nights 2, has 203 million views. All I'm saying is there wasn't any video like that centered around FNAF 3. If FNAF 1 piqued people's interest, FNAF 2 got their full-on attention, because most people who maybe skipped out or missed the FNAF 1 craze were definitely roped in for FNAF 2. I'm willing to bet that the FNAF fandom was at its peak in the FNAF 2 era. Yeah, you can make an argument that now things are pretty big, considering the movie is drawing back in a lot of people, but during the second game's era, the fandom was super active. We had content coming in from everywhere: DeviantArt, Tumblr, Newgrounds, Amino, Google+. I used to be in a Google+ FNAF community. We had ops. There was anti-FNAF accounts preying on our downfall. FNAF 2 just added so much more to play with. The toy animatronics were a neat addition. Rule 34 culture really liked Toy Chica, and people who did Gmon and SFM literally got a content refresh. Scott pretty much said new hostages dropped, have fun. There were new models, new cringy ships, and angsty teen webcomic material. There were people who had nothing to do with FNAF jumping on the FNAF craze. Mostly musicians behind the biggest songs during this era are people who just went on a whim and made a FNAF song because the game was popular. The numbers speak for itself, and yes, FNAF 2 in retrospect may not be the best game in any of the categories you look to judge a game, but the memories created during this era are literally unmatched to this day. So maybe that's it. Maybe that's the true power of FNAF 2. FNAF 2 may not be the greatest game in the franchise, but it created what most other games of the franchise cannot: a sprawling community that redefined an entire internet era.